Welcome to the Wise and Happy Life podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern science, and mindfulness, philosophy, and happiness practices blend with neuroscience, compassion, and common sense. Hosted by Bob Martin, meditation mentor, happiness coach, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur. This podcast explores how to live with grace, presence, and purpose in a complex world.
So, when you mentioned that about the parasympathetic nervous systems and the two alternative ways that we can be, either in that stressed out fight flight mode or in that rest and digest creative connection and the like. And you were talking a lot about connection earlier on, and that sense of connection is all parasympathetic left brain function,
Right.
and the danger and stress and everything is right brain function.
Right.
So, yoga is an ancient art, goes back how far? Thousands and thousands of years, right?
The consensus is kind of somewhere between 2,000 to 6,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but
It's pretty broad.
that's a big gap as far as what they decide. But, I've heard from both sides, just there's a lot of
Yeah.
different speculation about how old it is, but at the youngest, it's 2,000 years old for sure. There's,
Yeah.
plaques that the Smithsonian had an exhibit on yoga a few years ago, and I went up and got to see it. And there are stone plaques with people in yoga poses. And it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty impressive to think that something,
Right.
the practice itself is that old.
So but even as it developed, and the oldest known teachers and in the oldest known scriptures, they
Hmm.
all talk about samadhi is ultimately, the goal.
Right.
Happiness, ultimately
Sure.
a sense of divine connection.
Hmm.
And you and I have often talked about how similar, because my teaching of meditation, your teaching of yoga, you go from the body to the mind to the soul.
Right.
And in meditation, we go from the mind to the body, to the soul.
Hmm.
But the goals are all the same. And I've been thinking about something later. I want to throw this out to you and ask me what you think. And again, I'm just going to preface this with the idea that uh, what God is or is not, whether God thinks like we think or speaks English, or has a physicality body or has a particular place that he or it lives, is just above the pay grade of this conversation.
Right.
But okay,
Yeah, for sure.
but but
That's
but
for another podcast.
that's for another podcast. But if you think about the main message of all of the great wisdom teachers, going back to the people that developed yoga, going back to Lao Tzu and Taoism and the Buddha and Krishna and all of the great wisdom teachers, even the modern ones, the Gandhis and the Buddhist monks, Thich Nhat Hanh and the Dalai Lama, there's this feeling that they came because they want to teach us to be good people so that we will have a better world. And lately, when I really look at what they're saying, and of course I include Jesus Christ in as one of the greatest
Sure.
wisdom teachers,
Hmm.
all all they were really saying was just be happy. And it just so happens coincidentally that living a good and virtuous, and disciplined life is what does make you happy. So
Right.
the two paths kind of concede, but I really get the feeling that they were just very loving people who all they wanted is just please be happy. Just please be happy. You can
Right.
be happy. You can be
Right.
happy. Don't be so miserable.
That's it.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about, I think it's a process to seek out your happiness. And you have to find the things
Mhm.
that genuinely make you happy. You might have some things that make you what I would call fleetingly happy, where,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's that instant gratification kind of thing, but you have to seek out the things that really touch your soul. And I would come in from a band gig at 4 a.m. in the morning and be at yoga teacher training at 8 o'clock, 4 hours later. And they would go, "We don't understand how you can do that." And I said, "It feeds my soul to teach you yoga." And they were like, "Gosh, I'm not sure I could do that." And I said, "It's practice. It's practice. Show up for the things that make you happy, you know?"
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
think that, especially being in the space of running on fumes and no sleep and the day-to-day of our daily lives, and I still carve that time out. I think we talked about this at another point where I had to schedule my downtime on my calendar because I needed a few
Mm-hmm.
moments to myself daily. And it was important to me to actually schedule that time in. Now, whatever I end up doing, whether I read a book or I go get a coffee or whatever I end up doing, I think that we don't have a tendency to allow ourselves the opportunity to schedule those things. And if we don't schedule them, they kind of get away from us. And so
Mm-hmm.
in order
No,
to
absolutely.
create more happiness in my life, I needed to put that in my daily schedule so that I have that space to be able to say I needed some space and some downtime to be able to feel more relaxed and less anxious. And you know, the the happiness is a result of that, which is good.
Mhm.
But I do think you're right about the great spiritual leaders. They all want everyone to be loved, to feel love for themselves, and that in turn also helps them to be happy. Because I every
Mm-hmm.
time that clients come to me and they go, "I just don't like who I am." And I'm like, "That's part of your work. You have to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what you can love about yourself. And that in turn makes you a
Yeah.
more pleasant person to be around."
Right. Yeah, truly. And that makes me always think of a couple of issues, not issues, but thoughts that I have about those two great commandments that
Mhm.
Jesus left us with. The first was love your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind.
Mhm.
And what I always think about being a mindfulness teacher, what I always think about is if your mind is all messed up with, I don't love myself and I'm very critical of myself, and the committee on my head is always going off telling me how
Yeah.
I'm not worthy. How can you love your God with all of your mind if your mind is cluttered up with all that? You
Mhm.
know. And the other one, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, what if you don't love yourself?
Right.
And these were not the two great suggestions.
Mhm. Right.
These are the two great commandments, like,
Commandments, right.
so if you want to live, a virtuous life, you are commanded, in this system, you are commanded to love yourself
Right.
so that you can love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that we often just forget, to take the time, as you say, and take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
um
There's
you
no
know
doubt.
I,
There I think that, one of the things that always comes up and is when someone is being particularly nasty to you, you have to kind of understand and take a look at yourself and think, am I being the mirror? Are they being the mirror for me? Like, am I giving off that kind of energy? Am I not speaking to someone as politely as I could or being as kind as I could? And if it's reflecting, back on you. I did a social experiment about 2 months ago where I said, I'm just going to smile at everybody. And I'll tell you, about 50% of the people smiled back. About 25% of them looked down at the ground. And I thought, how sad is that? That
hmm
somebody smiling at you would make you look at the ground. And then about 25% of them didn't even notice that I had smiled at them. But it was an
hmm
interesting experiment because I was curious to see, how people are responding to each other, especially in this day and age where there is a lot of tension and there is a lot of unrest at times. And I think that it's important to be able to. I try to continue to be kind, to other people and treat them as I would want to be treated. And so I think
Hmm.
that, that commandment is super important, especially in this day and age.
Hmm. Little story. You're familiar, of course, with loving kindness meditation,
Hmm.
where you offer blessings to various people. And when it was first practiced in the East, uh, the meditation starts off by offering yourself certain blessings. May I have peace. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be free from mental suffering. May I be free from physical suffering. May I take care of all of my things happily. And then you offer these same blessings to a loved one, then to a neutral person, then to someone you have some difficulty with, and then maybe as your heart begins to grow stronger in the practice, you take on people that are more and more difficult, because the whole practice is learning to open your heart up to even the people to whom you don't want to open
Right.
your heart up to. And it's just a practice like going to the gym. You start with the 2 pound weights and then go to the 5 pound weights and the
Right.
6 pound weights and the like. But when the great masters came here to America and they discovered that there was so much self-criticism that was going on here, they says, oh, no, 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 we have to change the practice,
Hmm.
because it is too hard for Westerners to start off with blessing themselves.
Right.
They first have to learn to bless somebody they love. They'll find that easier.
Right.
And then even blessing a neutral. And after they get the sense of the physical sensation of what it feels like to bless someone, when they have embodied that, literally
Hmm.
embodied it, so that they have a true physical sensation of blessing. And
Hmm.
for those of you that are listening, I promise you that if you do this practice, there will come a time when your heart opens and you feel what it feels like physically to
Yes.
bless somebody, not intellectually, not up in your head like bless you, but
Right.
to really bless somebody authentically and sincerely. There is a sensation, and it's very akin to the sensation of feeling love, that
Hmm.
same kind of sensation. But they said it was much easier to open up to a neutral and build that muscle up before you come back and take yourself on.
Right. Isn't that
Um,
interesting?
you know
Yeah.
so um i- you know I guess, when our icon or our model of masculinity is the Marlboro man, the guy who's completely self-assured, sitting on his horse with his fur collar and leather jacket, taking care of 1,000 cattle, with no problem at all, smoking that Marlboro cigarette. If that's our icon of what it means to be a man, no wonder we're kind of critical of ourselves.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Well, hopefully with the movement towards better self-care and self-love,
Hmm.
and it's much more talked about now than it even was years ago. I think it's important to be able to have conversations about creating more self-care and more self-love, and I think that's
Hmm.
super important. And
And that goes right back to the beginning of the conversation of holding your heart. There actually is a practice. It's a four-step practice of when you are hurting. First to recognize it, say, this is pain. This is suffering. This is what it feels like to be in pain.
right,
And then to normalize it, understand I'm not the only one who's ever felt like this, and I won't be the only one who will ever feel like this, and there are so many others that do it. This is
right.
just part of being human.
Hmm.
And then offer yourself, may I treat myself as I would treat a friend
Right.
who is
Yeah.
feeling like this, and may I be able to have the strength to handle this with dignity. And again, touching your heart or stroking your arm, and just giving yourself that. Um,
I have
it's
a
uh,
I have a
it's an
great
important
practice
practice.
too.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that we do in yoga, and mudra is a hand gesture
Hmm.
based on symbolism for meaning different things. And so this one in particular is one of my favorite. It's called the Lotus Mudra. And so you put your thumbs together and your fingers together and you make kind of a little cup. And then the practice that goes with it is you think about filling the cup with all the good things in your life and be specific, right? What are the good things that you can bring into your life to fill up this cup? And think, okay, well, my dog, my job, my child, my relationships, all these good things that I can put in my cup. And then at the end of the practice, after you've focused on this for a few moments, you fold it into your heart. And that's how you finish the practice, because you're folding it into your
Mm.
heart. So you're taking all those good things and you're putting them right into your heart. And it always makes me teary. It brings up the emotion for
Hmm.
sure.
No, it sounds wonderful. And I think it's important to always know that these practices, they're not they haven't survived for thousands of years because they don't work.
Right. Right. No
and
doubt.
and 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 the wonderful part now is that there is so much research around the brain and what it does to the brain, that we find and we learn that imagining healing something, imagining loving something, imagining being generous with something
Mhm.
is no different inside the brain than actually doing it physically.
Physically. Right.
And so
Yeah.
you do develop some brain patterns. One of the things that I learned recently, which I just love the image, is that the filament of a light bulb, right,
Hmm.
is very, very thin,
Right.
but the electrical cord feeding it is very thick
Hmm.
comparatively. It's a big
Right.
electrical copper cord, and it goes into this little tiny filament. So you
Right.
can imagine, as if it were water, when it hits that filament, there's going to be a lot of resistance,
Hmm.
and it is the resistance that causes it to heat up and create the heat and the light. But it is resistance.
Isn't that
And our
interesting?
brain, yeah, and because the copper wire doesn't heat up
Right.
because
Right.
there's no resistance, because it's big and it's wide and the electricity just flows through it.
Right.
And so our brain, in the neural pathways, when we have a thought for the first time, it creates a little neurons that fire together, wire together, and it creates a little pathway that represents that thought.
Hmm.
But it's very, very thin.
Hmm.
And so the way that we sense it and feel it is, it's hard to think about that. Or
Hmm.
I don't like crossword puzzles, or I'm not good at math,
Hmm.
because the resistance of the electricity in the very thin neural pathway actually has a physical sensation of being uncomfortable.
Right.
But as we think about it over and over,
Hmm.
it changes to, I like math, or I'm good at crossword puzzles, or I like to
Right.
do word puzzles. And that's the physical sensation of having a well-developed neural pathway.
Right.
So there's just this incredible mind-body connection.
Hmm.
And I certainly don't understand yoga as well as you do, but I do have the faith and trust that, again, it wouldn't have survived over thousands of years if it didn't work. And there are things that they are
Hmm.
discovering now about what yoga does to us internally and in our mind that are mind blowing.
Yeah. And I think that, like we talk a lot about proprioception, about being able to feel what's in your body and
Hmm.
about, how do your joints feel? How do your muscles feel? And then part of the thing about being in practice and really focusing on, can you do the same things over and over and over again, just the way you reinforce the neural pathways in your brain? Physically, you create muscle memory. And the muscle
Hmm.
memory allows you to create, and we laugh about this in Pilates sometimes because it's all about building from one level to the next, to the next, to the next. And when you're creating muscle memory with the baseline, you may do an exercise for the basic level 150 times, and then we'll add to it. And sometimes I have to remind my clients it's okay to do this exercise over and over and over and over again, because when we go into the next part's going to be harder. But because your body and your mind will remember the first part of it, you will be more connected to it. And in a sense, it will be easier just because you have that connection from the beginning of it. And I think that's important, and from the yoga standpoint, there are a lot of different styles of yoga that keep you doing the same practice over and over again. So, for instance, sun salutations. Almost all styles of yoga have some form of sun salutation other than restorative, but have some form of sun salutation. And it's the practice of doing it over and over and over again. In yoga, there's something called a yoga mala, which is not the mala beads, but that's also called mala, but it's a practice of doing this circuit over and over and over again 108 times. And so there's a video out somewhere of the yogi throwing the stone. And so they bend down, they lay down on the ground, and they pick up a stone and they throw it, and then they stand back up. And they lay down and they pick up a stone and they throw it and they get back up. And they do it 108 times. And it's a ritualistic, but it's also reverence, because it's the whole practice itself is for God. And it's also the pattern of, where does your mind get to be released in the physical movement? And so having that kind of practice where you're doing the same movement and over again, you overthink it initially, and then you get to the point
Hmm.
where you're not thinking about it anymore and you're just going through the motions, and
Right,
then your mind
right,
goes somewhere else. And it's really
right.
it's
Yeah, I think the Japanese put it this way. They say, "Do it 100 times and you'll own it."
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So we're gonna wind down now, but I think about all the folks that haven't tried it or have some hesitancy to try it, and I want to share with you once when I uh, was trying it, and I was with this guy who could stick his head between his knees, right?
Hmm.
And he said, just bend over at the waist. And he bent over at the waist and stuck his head between his knees. And I
Right.
bent over at my waist and I was at a 90-degree angle.
Yeah. Right.
And he got up and he said, "It's okay. Just work at your edge. We're both doing the same work, you and I.
Yes.
Just work at your edge." So talk to that for just a moment.
So I think we get caught up in, especially in well, when yoga had its big resurgence 15 or so years ago, there were all these beautiful people on Instagram. And so everybody was comparing themselves to these beautiful yogis on Instagram. And, it just, I, I think it shuts people down a lot of times when they look around and they go, I don't see anybody like me. And there's a girl that I follow who I love and absolutely adore, and on Instagram, and she has a site called Fat Body Pilates, and she uses the reformer, and she's fabulous, and she works really hard at what she does, and I think that it's a really good thing that in the last few years that people are starting to come around to, I can try different things. It doesn't matter what I look like. And then, especially coming from, I work with dancers sometimes in my Pilates studio, and I have some like teenage kids, and then I have people all the way up to 96 years old in my studio. And it's just a matter of doing what your body can handle in the space. And you have to look at it from the space of, it's about progress, not perfection, and it's about being in the space of what is best for my body in this moment, because that also changes from day to day. Some days my body feels great, and I feel like I can push a little harder, and some days it doesn't feel so good. And I feel like I have to remind myself to hold back because I am that type A. But it really is, it's about where you are in the moment. And if we continue to focus on where we are in the moment, we realize that as long as I'm just being the best me that I can be in the moment, then
Whether it's 90, whether it's at a 90
whether
degree
it's
angle or
90 or
whether
head
my head,
between your knees. That's it.
doesn't matter. That's where I am, and that's where I'm working.
Right.
So this has been just a great conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. Now there may be some folks that have been listening to you that want to get in touch with you. Can you tell us, how they can get in touch with you?
Sure. My website is Evolve Movement Studio, all one word, .com. You can call me, text me. My number is 336-675-5639. I'm open to it. Um, Please leave a
A-
message if I do
Is that
not answer.
information on is that information on the website?
It is on the website. I'm
All right.
teaching
And so
currently.
that information is going to be in the show notes.
Yep.
So anybody that watches this, will have that information for them so they can get
Mhm.
in touch with you, and you're open to it, right? Even if it's just a question or somebody has an
Sure.
inquiry they want to know about it. Sure.
Hmm.
Just call
Yeah.
Cricket. And
Pilates,
and
yoga, dance, whatever you're thinking. It's all on my website. Yeah.
do you coach singers?
I don't. I don't.
You
The
wouldn't
joke.
wish you wouldn't wish that on anybody, right?
Well, the joke is I get paid to sing, so I try to save my voice the rest of the week. But honestly, everything I do has me talking, so it's all good though.
So, can you can with all of this, is there any single little piece of advice for somebody that's listening to this to give them a little uplift, a little
Sure,
motivation, a little thought to take home?
sure. Just really seek out what makes you genuinely happy, and make sure you make time for that in your life, in your busy schedule. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
it's such a big deal to be able to do that and show up.
and show up.
And
I
show
like
up.
that. I think that's my takeaway. That's my
That's it.
takeaway from the
That's it.
conversation. Just show up.
Just show
I
up.
think somebody said 80% of life is just showing up.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Thank you so much,
You're
Cricket
so
Foster.
welcome.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
everybody.
and thank you all for listening. Appreciate it. This was our first initial podcast. There'll be so many more to come, and if you liked it, please tell your friends. And if you're interested in yoga, please call Cricket. And she is the best. I've known her for a long time. Really good people. Thank you all very much, and be well, be happy, and be blessed.